Hello, good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Minds on Guard, where we're engaging with the 21st century media and learning how to guard our minds against all of the manipulative tactics that exist within the modern mainstream media, so that we can protect our thoughts from control, manipulation, and ultimately so that we can live better, more fulfilling lives that are rooted and grounded in truth and not being swayed in the wind by all of the crazy manipulations that exist in the 21st century media, the wild environment that we find ourselves in today. Last time we met, we wrapped up a series of videos where we were looking at an article from Yahoo News that was discussing the push that has been happening toward the adoption of synthetic meat and actually insects as potential replacements for natural meat, such as cows, chickens, and seafood. These things that are either raised via the traditional means of farming and or the harvesting of them in the wild. The aim of that series of videos from the very beginning was to discuss all of the various ways that the article was written, which wind up being either manipulative or in any way sort of presenting a directed narrative that might point to a conclusion that was predetermined, which is in support of a certain worldview or various ideologies, ideas. And in that, we discussed a lot. We looked at logical fallacies. We looked at various tactics of leaving negative space for us to conclude from, things that the author would lead our minds toward thinking and maybe adopting without our knowing it. And in that, I made some statements throughout the series that may have been seen as very assumptive regarding what was being discussed or alluded to. The things that I was saying are informed by a level of understanding that I have regarding the larger moves being done at the global level, of which the article on the alternative sources of meat actually plays a role, specifically as a component of long-term shifts toward acceptance of things that were once viewed as like strange or even downright offensive. In part, I'm addressing what is known as shifts in the Overton Window. The concept of the Overton Window can be thought of as a model for understanding how ideas in society change over time and influence politics. Whatever is considered to be within the window at any given time may be seen as the set of ideas or policies that are deemed acceptable and good at the societal level, and thus most people are amenable toward enacting legislation or adopting various cultural norms that reflect those ideas. This concept exists in reality at a metaphysical level, and the window is always opening and closing, and expanding and contracting. Maybe a more accurate way to think about it is that it is always moving to the left or the right side of the political spectrum. The Overton Window is always in flux, and it operates at all levels of society. It's most commonly thought of with the respect to politics and the sorts of things that politicians are most likely to support or reject. Because of this, its role in influencing the movements of society that are happening at the global level must never be overlooked. To think about this, if a certain group of people can exert enough pressure or force to shift the Overton Window in any given direction, then they will have harnessed a level of power and control that is extremely difficult to counter. In a previous video, I spoke about the need to be able to hold both the macro and micro contexts of whatever we're dealing with in our view at all times. It's important that we do not lose sight of the entire forest in an effort to identify each and every individual tree. Yet, we must also be able to track the incremental changes and be on the lookout for the things that go against our core values and our worldview. When we can understand that the Overton window is always present in our socio-political environment, we can begin to see and track when there are efforts being made to shift the scope or field of vision of the window, and we can do our best to then appeal to the truth of reality as it is, rather than what the architects of the current or even future frames would prefer us to accept. One of the most effective and often used mechanisms of control that gets employed in order to shift the Overton window is known as the Hegelian dialectic. This is most easily conceptualized as the phrase problem, reaction, solution. There's a lot to discuss regarding this concept, and there are many deep and nuanced ways that it's used. The most simple way to think about it in the context of manipulating the Overton window would be to consider any special interest that may wish to push their agenda onto a set of the population. The question to ask would be, how can they get this done and ensure that the special interest goals are met? Well, one way is to create a problem that the special interest is certain to be able to solve through the adoption of their agenda or idea. If the problem is severe enough or dire enough that a large enough group of people react in such a way as that they demand a solution, then the special interest is in the most opportune place to influence the most people toward accepting their ideas. If then a majority of people places high enough value on the special interest's solution, and it's then adopted en masse, resulting in new laws or public policy, then the Overton window has been moved in the direction of the political ideology of the special interest, and the Hegelian dialectic was the vehicle for the change. If we think on the events of just U.S. history, we can find this methodology at work over and over and over again. Sometimes this has been done to greatly benefit much of society, while other times it's resulted in the most extreme harms and unspeakable tragedies. Just examine the events of the early 20th century in Germany or Russia, even later in China, and you'll see just how bad things can get through this kind of manipulation at a societal level. The thing that I wish to point to in this video is that often what is being manipulated is people's free will to understand the truth of reality and then make choices based on that. Instead, what's happening is that we must contend with outside influences that are trying to sway our thinking in one direction or another. That's what this channel is aiming to root out and fight against. That's what the whole goal of this endeavor is. Some of what I'd like to begin discussing a bit moving forward deals with the concept of captured agencies. When I say this, it means that at some level, a major agency or group that is controlled by some type of overseeing entity has, at the policy level, been co-opted and forced toward the promotion of specific and directed desires or interests which serve a small number of deeply invested individuals. In upcoming videos, I'm going to be discussing what are known as think tanks, as well as various special interest groups. We'll also begin to dig into various philanthropic foundations and attempt to shed light on a movement that has been happening for many, many years, and that is being the shift toward a global level of centralization and the concentration of power, influence, wealth, and control. This will be a journey, and there are going to be a lot of moving pieces over a long span of time. I hope to show that our minds are actually they're actually under attack at all levels throughout all times throughout each day. And there are certain people and groups whose aim it is to keep us enslaved to their programming influence. So, please join me on the next phase of our learning, specifically how we can stay rooted in reality as we work to stay diligent and vigilant, keeping our minds on guard.